my favorite thing is the potential, that creativity piece. And how do we apply it to business?
Mindfulness, presence, discernment, and prioritization might be the key skills for success in a professional environment.
Another big one that I do is locating the space between your fingers, because a lot of people are associated with their hands.
Good ideas come to me easily. And as long as you believe that, then it becomes true.
Wow! You are listening to the Bold Business Podcast. Hey. In this program, Jess Duell hosts experts who share information with you about solving problems and communicating priorities to help you guide your company toward its biggest goals.
Come on!
I am so glad that you are here with me today so that we can talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart. Something around being curious, something around finding stillness, and something even around my favorite thing is the potential, that creativity piece. And how do we apply it to business? Maybe today, maybe tomorrow, but how do we apply it to business? And so all of you listening and watching, I am excited to introduce you to today's panel. And I am going to let each of our panelists introduce themselves to you. All right. So, Catherine, the floor is yours for hello.
Hello. I'm Catherine Altman Morgan. I am the founder of Point A to Point B Transitions, a business consultant and an author is me. I am excited to be on today's discussion because mindfulness is also a topic near and dear to me, and I think critically important in today's society. And I forgot to mention, I'm located in Chicago.
Claire, hello.
Yes. Hi, Jess. Thank you for having me on this show. I'm so glad to be here. My name is Claire Uncapher. I work with clients around depression and anxiety, or just generalized unhappiness. And I'm really excited to be on today's show because mindfulness, presence, intuition, listening to yourself is such a big part and a big theme in people that have lived their lives without checking in. And so I'm really excited to talk about it.
And Janice, hi.
Hey, how are you? I'm Janice Campbell. I am an acupuncturist and an herbalist and a somatic touch practitioner and a distance mind-body integration specialist, and all of which I say is where I use different tools to name and tame the elephants in the room. I'm excited to be here because creativity and mindfulness are part of the bag of tricks I use and encourage in other people to help them crawl out of the boxes they've inadvertently or unconsciously put themselves in. And I'm really interested to hear what everybody else has to say.
When I pick panels, you were all handpicked to be here. So I had been introduced to Claire, and Catherine and I have been in a panel discussion before. And Janice, you and I have started to have a few conversations. And so over the course of about, I'd say 3 days, it was when it was like, these are the people that I want to bring together. And I want to hear it from you first. So we're going to start with you, Catherine. What are the links between mindfulness and creativity in business?
Okay, this is such a juicy topic. The links between mindfulness and creativity in business, we could probably talk about this for hours, but there's a couple that jump to mind. And let's first talk about creativity as a component of innovation. So you don't have innovative ideas in a box. They come from creative thinking and creative problem solving. And if there's one thing that we need right now in these crazy times, is ways to drop into being present and having space for ideas to land is how I like to think about it. We need brain space so that the ideas can come in, and we need physical space and physical spaces to manifest the ideas and put them into practice. So there isn't a business right now that isn't struggling to keep up with the rate of change of business, of markets, of technology. And the way that you can do that, oddly enough, is to slow down. And because you're not going to get good ideas if you're running around on the hamster wheel with your hair on fire. They just don't have any place to be. So I think mindfulness is a critical skill for being a leader personally or professionally or in the marketplace. One of the benefits in your leadership for mindfulness is a trip switch so that you don't get drawn into the conversation that you know is going to go sideways. You don't hit send before of that flame mail that's going out there that you'll have to back away from for months or years. I just think that if people were going to only work on one skill over the next 6 months to a year, mindfulness might be the one to pick.
Thank you, Catherine. Claire, what are the links between mindfulness and creativity in business?
First, I have to say, I hope you know I'm a rebel. I never loved the word mindfulness, actually, but I love the definition of what it is. It always sounded like something that I had to do or achieve. How I experience mindfulness is feeling good, just like you just described. You were sitting down with your tea, you were open, you were receptive, you were feeling good in that moment, and boom, creativity or inspiration hits you. And so I stay in that feeling good space. I actually really pay attention to that. And when I do, the ideas, creativity, it comes to me. It's not like a pushing and a searching. I'll be in the shower or on a walk or in the car. And it's like you just said, that lightning bolt of creativity that feels, dare I say, brilliant. Like Catherine said, if you're too far in the future or too far in the past, or I would take it one step further, if you're just not feeling good, if you're all jammed up, it can't come to you. The signals are jammed, but it's this vicious cycle, right? Then I don't have any ideas right now. And so I'm pushing, searching, brainstorming, but nothing's coming. I honestly think sometimes the most productive thing to do is take a nap or go for a walk or do something that makes you laugh and get into that space, that breathing space. And then those ideas, that creativity, that inspiration finds you. It comes in and it just hits you when you least expect it.
Thank you. Janice, what are the links between mindfulness and creativity in business?
I'm not a super big fan of the word mindfulness either. However, when I think of it in terms of the medicine that I practice, the mind is considered to reside in the heart, and the brain is like a high-paid legal assistant that really should not be driving the bus. And so it's easier for me to think of it in those terms. However, mindfulness is like the gateway drug of any of us getting back into our bodies the way we were when we were little. From there comes possibility. It's a bit like when I was teaching, I was supervising in acupuncture clinic for master's and doctoral level students. I would remind people that they had a wealth of not just book learned experience, but life experience and human experience. And we all have a whole library, whether we're 15 or 95. We've all got a whole library of experience and knowledge that we just don't know we have. And so I would encourage them to do what I called at the time the magic 8-ball form of treatment planning, which was to quiet themselves, become present to life in front of them, either metaphorically or actually physically shake their head, and then something would go bloop to the top of their head, and then it would almost inevitably be the right thing to do. And in the same way in business, when met with a problem, rather than focusing on the problem, which just ties the knot tighter, sitting in the face of what would a smooth flow feel like without this in the way? What would the smooth flow feel like? And allow yourself to do that magic 8-ball form of solution finding. And inevitably, something will come to you. It may sound completely out of the box and a little weird. And then if you follow that, though, you'll realize how it's possible because you already know. You just have to find the pieces.
Focused on growth? Listen to more programs like this which support the challenges and opportunities you are working with right now. Come on! Search Bold Business Podcast for the key terms at reddirection.com or your preferred podcast listening app.
there were a few things that came up that I hear across all: space in some form, the willingness to be open, almost actually to ourselves, regardless of what our role is. If we're not open to ourselves, how could we be open to others? So that's another thing that I was hearing across. And then it's also maybe our vocabulary about this is dated or actually untrue or inaccurate, so that there's a better conversation to be having for these same things, which I'm excited. I'm always excited when people are like, well, that's not what I believe, or I'm actually rebelling against this, or what do you actually talk about there, lady? All of those things come into play. If I were to pick a place to start, it seems like starting with space, the purpose of the space. So we have the physical space that we're in, that Catherine was talking about, the taking a break and laughing that Claire was talking about, and the magic 8-ball pause that Janice was talking about. So if we were to take that a little bit further, do you have tips with which to begin to trust in that need for space? Because I actually wonder, do we actually lack trust for ourselves for that need of space before we can even do this and think it's more than a novelty?
Okay, I would say I deal with the subconscious beliefs, and I believe we learned very early on that we can't trust ourselves. We consult the subconscious mind, and we go back to how, where, why, and when you ever started not trusting yourselves. A few examples is a little girl who her mom was so stressed and busy, and so she decided she was going to help out. Whether or not these are true, it doesn't matter. The subconscious mind just plays charades with you to give you a picture. And she went and got soap and squeezed the whole bottle on the floor. And obviously her mom had the kind of response any other mom would have. And she remembered coming to the conclusion, oh, I thought I had a good idea, but I guess I didn't. I didn't have a good idea. So I think we learned not to tune into ourselves. We even have to raise our hand to ask if we can go to the bathroom, all that. Don't just turn that off. And also, when we listen to ourselves, there's often not a lot of evidence to support why we should follow that direction. And so it's very easy to be like, I kind of want to do this, but is a good indicator that you are tuning into intuition, but we haven't given ourselves permission to trust ourselves. The way I started trusting myself was dealing with the subconscious beliefs, but then also just remembering all the times that I truly did listen to myself and how it worked out. And then there were times that I just knew I didn't want to go on that trip. I just knew I didn't want to go be with those people. And then it didn't work out. So it's not tangible. It's not concrete. There's not a lot of evidence and reason. So it's very easy to bypass those nudges.
And I would add to that there's also a piece of allowing yourself to be in your body in a way. One of the things I recommend for people who spend a lot of time at their desk is to take their shoes off and rub them on the floor to remind them that there's something below their neck. Because we sort of evolved to act like everything below our neck is here to carry our head and our hands around, and then we wonder why things are arguing. But it's really about, for me, in my view, it's really about reclaiming that ability that, remember when you were a kid and you were playing and then you came back from it, but it was really only 15 minutes or 5 minutes or 2 minutes, and you had traveled to the other side of the world and back. Time still continues to be malleable, but we believe that we don't have it. And we believe that I don't have time to be mindful. I don't have time to sit and daydream about this. I don't have time. Practicing unhooking from a clock for 2 minutes, 3 minutes tops, and letting your mind go wherever it goes, even if it's I'm worried about this, and that made me think about what I had for breakfast and and just letting yourself follow the crazy spaghetti path of whatever floats through. But not holding on to any one thing, letting it, as one of my mentors says, when something shows up in your mind, kiss it on the head and send it on its way. And I'm worried about this. Yes, and we'll talk about that later. I had this for breakfast. Yes, and we will eat again after this meeting or whatever it is. So that you're beginning to allow that elasticity to open up again of time. so that within a minute or 2 minutes, you may be able to solve a problem that if you sat and actually concentrated on solving would take you 2 or 3 days.
I want to tag on to what Janice said. There is the thing about creating space and letting yourself flow. But I think one of the problems people have with mindfulness, besides the term that seems to be like, we could probably find a better one, is that it may be linked with self-care. And a lot of, we're talking specifically business and mindfulness. Self-care can equal self-indulgence because I'm not doing the thing in the business. So we may actually not feel entitled to taking this time if we put it in the self-care bucket, and we can tap onto these self-worth things. I'm not valuable enough to take this time for me, which a lot of my clients struggle with, probably a lot of your clients struggle with. But if we could convince people of the benefits, like creative thinking, creative problem solving, brainstorming, being kinder to yourself and others, I think we have a better chance of getting people to embrace mindfulness.
And also just remembering, remember when it was fun? Remember when you decided that this was a good thing, that this would be a cool thing to do with your life? Then it gives you permission to actually enjoy what you're doing in a way that, because life is too short not to be having a good time. It doesn't mean that spending thousands of hours building an entire playhouse out of Legos doesn't take time and effort, but you're building a playhouse out of Legos or whatever it is that you're doing. And remembering that, as I like to say to some of my patients, you're a grown-up, you can have dessert first. And I got this from a friend of mine whose husband, every time he goes to a restaurant, he orders his dessert first. So he sees how big it is. So he decides what to order for his main dish. And then he eats his main dish. And then he has room for the dessert because he was getting frustrated that he would order too much food for his main dish and not have room for dessert. And so he plans around dessert. And whenever somebody asks, he says, it is my culture. And he's from Merida, Mexico. And his wife, who's American, always says, I lived in Merida. No one else in your culture does this. And I didn't say it was anyone else's culture. I said it was my culture.
For people, like, if we're talking about the word, for people like me that hear mindfulness, and when I was first learning all this stuff, I went and got a workbook and a book on mindfulness. Oh my gosh, don't give me something to do. I have enough to do. I think it was Janice talking about time, or Catherine, but do you have time to tune in to what feels good and what doesn't? And really, it's as simple and as complicated as that. The most successful people in business that I know unapologetically do and make decisions and have guests on that feel good to them. And if it doesn't feel good, they feel like they have permission to just be like, no, thank you. And that is an extreme example of following how it feels and staying in that inspired space.
So Jess, here's the pro tip. We'll call mindfulness the ultimate productivity hack, and then everybody will think they have to do it.
I like it. I like it.
I like
Yes.
it. Oh.
Also, too, the piece about that, the ultimate productivity hack, is that it's quick and it actually doesn't have to take a lot of time. Sometimes I think people hear mindfulness or self-care or any of these buzzwords. They think I need special clothes. I have to clear a place in my office to be able to sit on a meditation mat. I've got to put on special music. I've got to put a sign on my door. I have to justify why I'm late to that meeting. It doesn't take long.
If you are ready to make a real impact in your business and you've waited too long to take action, go to reddirection.com and click on Solutions to find out how.
I actually am just now in an office space for the first time in many years, am leaving my house to go to work. And at first I felt guilty. And I couldn't figure out why I was feeling guilty. And then it turns out that need for a physical space that when people come in, they know it's mine. It's the space I am holding, which takes energy, and it has its own boundary, and it has its own purpose and work that occurs in it that doesn't get snacks brought in, that doesn't get the sound of the washer and dryer in there, or people making their tea and having breakfast, all of that. And I missed it. And in fact, I actually didn't miss it. I felt guilty because it wasn't around. And once I let go of that, because Catherine talked about this at the very beginning, the physical space matters. I was more productive in the first 2 months of being here than I had been in the last 12 not being here. And so until we take that action, which is big and scary and risky and time consuming to move stuff, it still is, it's amazing what comes through. And then Claire, you were talking about laughing, taking a break just to laugh. And I am definitely against social media from doom scrolling, but when I only have 5 minutes and I can set a timer and my goal is to find something to make me laugh, it's not doom scrolling anymore. It's actually something fun and useful. And then that whole concept of, what if I just sat here a minute? And my minute when we're not doing anything, feels like a million years. And how crazy is it that it only feels that way when we don't give ourselves permission anymore to be in that space because we never have any. They're always eluding us. And it's very interesting. So that was some of the stuff that was coming up for me around space when I was listening to all of you. From that little thing I just did, what's coming up for you?
I just thought about what Janice said about, she talks so much about being in your body. And for me, a lot of what I do is trying to keep people in their bodies because they just bounce right back out of them. Someone may want to incorporate some of these ideas and practices, but being in their body is such a foreign concept to them and so uncomfortable to them. It's not accessible, I think. What do you think, Janice?
Whether it's in my treatment room as an acupuncturist or when I'm working with somebody online or in large groups, I'm bringing people back into their bodies so that they can be completely there and time can move however time needs to move for them.
But people aren't comfortable staying there.
What I often will do is give people specific parts of their body to try to feel without touching it. If they're used to spending so much time in their head and their shoulders and their hands, they forget about the rest of it. I'll perhaps say, spend an entire minute feeling the insides of your elbows without touching them. Or feeling the backs of your knees, or another big one that I do is locating the space between your fingers. Because a lot of people are associated with their hands. But don't do this. Don't close your fingers up and cheat. Just let your fingers be separated and lay them on the table and find the spaces between your fingers. That's a beginning of a practice of allowing them to get back into their body and find that space. The other thing that came up when you were talking, Jess, is I still have a drafting table and I draw a great bit, but years ago in a space that I have lots of things that inspire me, images and thoughts and words and whatever, and I would have them all on the wall around in front of me. My table would face the wall, and I would have them all in the framing, all of that. But I would always have a big white space in the middle. And the big white space in the middle was where I imagined things and where I saw this stuff might come in. These other illustrators I love, quotes from people. But the white space in the middle was where I could see what I was thinking of.
Janice, you are my sib from another crib because I do something very similar. I've never met anybody else that does that.
Okay, speaking of whiteboards, I have to share this. Some of you, I think Janice mentioned getting your great ideas in the shower. Somebody did. A lot of people say that, yeah, I get my best ideas when I'm on a walk or I'm in the car or I'm in the shower. Why? Because you're not thinking. Sitting here looking at the flashing cursor is not going to get you your best thoughts. You're better off going for a walk around the block. But a colleague of mine says she actually bought a whiteboard and put it in her shower with erase markers because she did consistently get her best ideas in the shower. And she said it was one of the best things she did.
I actually know somebody also who works at home, and she will get dressed and leave and walk like around 2 blocks worth to walk home after work. And she will also do that to walk to work. And it creates that bookend of now I'm at work, now I'm not at work. I love that. I love that kind of thing.
If I took just 1 minute every day, how long would it be before ideas started to just come to me? Because I'm thinking about the people who are not us, who might be listening, who are a little coming back to that trust. I'm not sure I can trust this. Even more than myself. Can I even trust that this is possible?
I would just start telling myself every day, good ideas come to me easily. And as long as you believe that, then it becomes true. I started saying, everything is always working out for me. Everything is always working out for me. I completely trust it. If I had gotten a GI bug before this recording, and I would believe everything's working out for me. It wouldn't be bum luck. And when I started saying that, and that took 5 seconds, I don't know, and starting to adapt that attitude, things started feeling, wow, I'm like the luckiest person in the world. Things always work out for me. Even if it's like something that wouldn't seem like it would work out, I just trust it in ways I don't need to understand that it is. And so I would challenge your listeners to say the phrase, good ideas come to me easily, and see how that feels. Is there a yeah, but? Because then that needs to be addressed. But if it feels good to them and they start walking around saying it, then all of a sudden good ideas are going to come to them easily because our beliefs have to be true.
Well, here's some ideas for your more analytical types. What if you engaged your curiosity and ran an experiment? So you had some data. For a week, you're going to set a timer. You're going to sit there and do literally nothing but stare at the wall or listen, nothing, and breathe for 2 minutes. You have 2 minutes. Nobody can say that they're so busy that they can't set a 2-minute timer and do it. And see if after a week you don't feel any different. I think a lot of the problems with mindfulness is people think that they're going to get their mind to be completely still and Zen rock garden. Minds don't do that. They chatter. But like Janice said, kiss the idea on the head and let it go. Or the Buddhists say, let the cloud pass through. And I think people have unrealistic expectations of what mindfulness is. But if you got them to try it, run an experiment, calendar it from 2 to 2:05, or 2 to 2:03, I'm going to sit here and do nothing. And then see if that space brings you any personal ease, personal calm, grace with yourself, grace with your coworkers, grace with your kids, grace with your partner. See if you didn't crack the door open for something that maybe you should then fully open the door for.
For people who pre-disaster things, which, by the way,
that you did.
I have some experience with that previously in my life.
I married one.
So, okay, for those that pre-disaster things and have to be wildly prepared for stuff, one of the most freeing things that I ever did was realize at a very low point in a variety of things were flying around the room in my life. I thought, okay, if for some bizarre reason I lose my license and we lose the house and I lose my reputation and my husband doesn't have a job, and I thought of all the horrible things that could possibly happen, right? And we end up in a cardboard box living somewhere under the bypass. Would at that point, my 3-year-old, would he still get up, throw his arms around me and say good morning? Yes. B, would one of my friends, at least one of them, show up and bring me a cup of tea? Absolutely. Okay, I can live in a cardboard box if I have the company of my husband and my son and somebody brings me a cup of tea. I can figure this out after that. And then once I'd pre-disastered it all down to everything going down in a handbasket, then I was like, all right, I have a potential that actually would free me up to have more possibilities of choices after that, because I wouldn't have to worry about mortgages or whatever. And then suddenly I was like, so why am I not operating that way now? And it gave me it just lightened my load, knowing that I'd already carried it out to the logical conclusion, figured out what I'd do if that happened, and now I can move on with other things.
I love that. I've done that too. And I call, if we're talking about our husbands, I call money monopoly money. My husband will say, oh, he owns a business and the HVAC went out. And I'm like, and it's going to be this many thousands of dollars. I'm like, it's just monopoly money. Like, and it comes in, it goes out, it comes in, it goes out. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but I feel better when I view it like that, because it really, like Janice said, we'd be okay. We'd figure it out. I'm not going to get all crazy about it in this moment.
And that brings up my favorite quote about money ever, which is from Hello Dolly, which is, money is like manure. It is not worth a damn thing unless it is spread around encouraging young things to grow.
Love it.
Hey, did you know? Of those of us with a plan, 10% just have an idea, 75% have written but don't use their plan, and 15% successfully achieve what is in their plan. Know exactly where you are and what is the necessary work to get where you want to go with a growth mindset reset. This is dedicated time to evaluate exactly where your business is, where you want it to go, and the trajectory you are currently on. Go to reddirection.com solutions to get started.
This is really interesting because here's the deal. All of the people that I know that have consistently good ideas, all of the people that I know that have had one or two or more exits that are successful in their business and allowed for adjustment, pivots, something brand new to occur, all of the people who you look at and see out there, wow, they just must be naturally gifted at that. May be true. Without the elasticity of time, would definitely not be true. And so I know that it's been proven wrong, right? The 10,000 hours was the big thing a while ago. It still comes up occasionally, and it's more about that hones the skill, but it doesn't create the space with which to think laterally in a way. And what I'm hearing us talk about today when it comes to innovation, when it comes to what ease and from a place of ease possibility can exist, is that it's that not and monopoly money. It is what it is.
It works for me.
I'm using monopoly money because it's easy to remember, but I think we all have those things, right? It is what it is. I just didn't talk about it. I had a really high floor, so I didn't balance a check once when there's this thing called a checkbook and you had to do math. What? No, just make that balance high. No problem. So whatever it, and this is actually another point. As each of you are speaking, I think I'm learning a little bit about you. Do you lead with a place with which structure is important, with which to develop and bounce ideas so that they can ensure to bounce back? Is it action so that we have the results and the data? Is it a pause? Because then we don't know what's going to show up. And I know I'm the last one because people think that I'm always like, there's just silence or the phone drops, or they think I've frozen on a screen, or my family's like, why don't you know the answer to this yet? And I'm a slow loading web page. That's I truly need 10 seconds to be thoughtful. And it's not because I'm not expecting anything else, but I will tell you, that is it. I'm almost 46. I think I decided to embrace that 2 years ago. It took me well into my 40s to acknowledge that is actually a strength.
What are you doing? Are you feeling it out? Are you thinking it? And what are you doing in those
I don't think, no, in those moments, it's literally a pause of, is there something here? How do I actually feel about that? That's really it. How do I feel about this? And then I'll know what question to ask. And it creates awkward silence. And I actually think awkward silence comes from those of us who are willing to take the pause and just experience for a minute, one way, versus those who make them and hold them, because that's also a good strategy. Don't get me wrong about that. I'm all about the awkward pause. We can do that all day long, but I come by that naturally. And when I embraced it, it totally changed how I felt about myself, because I never felt like I was catching up to everybody else. I was like, oh no, this is the way that I do it to add value here.
I actually have a cheat for that because I do that too.
Do you? Oh,
I pause.
I'm ready.
But I do have a cheat for the people that can't handle that.
Oh, okay.
And that is, I'll say, how do I say? And then I'll come back and say it.
Oh, how do I say?
How do I say?
Oh.
And they know that I'm looking. They know that I'm...
How do you say?
But it gives them a minute of... That gives them something to hold on to while I'm off rifling through the files or waiting for something to float up. Or
I like that.
I don't use it all the time, but every once in a while when I know somebody's just not going to be able to handle me wandering off and appearing to, did you leave? Were you distracted? Am I boring you? That kind of thing. Like, how do I say?
So when you show up, are there times when keeping this theme of time being elastic, I'll take it in the moment, even if it seems weird. And I've embraced that after many years of trying to hide it or work around it or think it was a weakness. Are there traits that you have done that with, that the processes that we've been talking about, changing, getting in our bodies more, changing location, willing to run experiments that help you embrace something that's actually truly a strength of yours that was before not seen that way, that this concept of space and energy elasticity of time has attributed and helped you with?
I take it into the corporate setting. So if you want this to work within a business situation, once again, you would have to set up a space and some support structures to support creativity and innovation, because some ideas may not have been tried before. Some ideas might fail. Some ideas might be brilliant, but you'd have to give people a space to share them where they would be welcomed and not shut down. And you would have to give them permission to try things that may or may not work, and to let that be okay and not have them worried that their paycheck's going to go away if they try something and it fails. So in order to take the benefits of mindfulness and the creativity that, in my experience, it does bring into the workplace, you would have to set up the workplace culture and maybe even have innovation hubs within the organization to capitalize on these ideas.
Janice and Jess, I have a similar thing I do, but I say, I need to sit with that. I need to sit with that. And even if I think it's a really good idea, I'm like, I've learned, let me just sit with that for a little bit to make sure it still feels good when I'm outside of this group energy. So Catherine's talking about like a boardroom type situation or a business meeting situation, making it part of the culture to, okay, let's sit with that. And then everybody's minds, what we don't really want in the minds, but they will go to work a little bit and be like, oh, I didn't think about this. Or that doesn't quite feel right. So I don't have that pause where before the response, I just know that I'm going to have to take the idea, go away from the group, let it run over a few times in my body, in my mind, in my heart, in my nervous system, and then I'll know.
All of these things take vulnerability, which is why I wanted to pause a minute. Because when we trust ourselves, that's a place of big, somebody told me I wasn't right, and I chose to believe them at the time for whatever reason. And so learning that trust is important, but also then being able to go, now I can actually show this to other people. That's a whole other ballgame. So tying back to what Catherine was saying about safety, can we even be in a space with which somebody could say, let me take that and sit with that, or share an off the wall idea because it was something that came up to them in a moment. And that's actually something that I know when I think about business, when I think about mindfulness, to the points that we've been talking about it, mindfulness is for life, not just for self-care, is what my big takeaway is from this conversation, that it opens up all kinds of doors.
Or you asked what was the thing that was previously considered a disadvantage of the way we operate versus being an asset. Mine is less about the ability to take time and more about being able to think about 15 things at once and being able to draw lines between things that are not normally associated with each other. For a long time, I would have the effect of people like, Janice has gone on a tangent. She'll either be back or she won't. Should we pay attention or shall we start having another conversation over here while she rattles on? But I cultivated it over time to become, stick with me because you'll like the ride. So this is how this is going to fit together. And we're going to get to someplace in a much more interesting way than before. But then in talking about it in a company or corporate setting, I think also setting up a place where where you're willing to run pilots or theoretical pilots of crazy ideas. See, here I'm doing it. I love Simon Sinek's thing that he talks about when the difference between working with business groups and working with the military. And he says that working with business groups, people will do a presentation to get feedback before showing it to the whole world. And people will tell them all the things they like about it. And then they'll go away with a few things to tweak, maybe some typos, not a lot of juice. But in the military, they'll share the presentation and then they'll say knives out or swords out. And then the people will actually go in and comment on all the stuff that needs to be taken away or changed to allow what's valuable to stay in place. That requires some of that vulnerability that you're talking about, Jess. But what I would add to that process, which I think is wildly valuable, is I would start with a what if scenario first. What if this were true? What if it ran like this? What would happen? Where does that go? Where do you see that taking us? Where do you see this flowing into the next thing? And then say, okay, we figured out that it'll go to one of these 16 places. Which of those 16 places do we like? And now knives out. How do we smooth that run to the place that we want to go? And it's like I used to say, people would say to me, my first career, I was a theatrical stage manager, and then I was also the director of clinical education at a big master's and doctoral level university for a while. And people love the fact that I could do these gorgeous color-coded charts and diagrams and flow sheets and whatnot for people. And I said, yeah, but what you don't understand is that I'm not creating them for the sake of the control of creating them. What I'm creating is a really smooth marble run with a lot of options. And what I want to be able to do is put the marble at the top, go outside, have fun, eat a good lunch, read a book, play some music, come back and find the marble at the bottom. So structure becomes a means by which to direct flow rather than an end in itself. All right, I just added a bunch of things together at once, which may or may not have made sense. Ask if they didn't.
I cannot speak for Claire or Catherine, but I will tell you, I was like, ooh, this is so great.
What about these three things all going together? Yeah.
There are so many things that we have just only scratched the surface on today. One of the things that I'm excited most about our panel discussion is that we have demonstrated moments of time where we're sharing how our view of the world might actually be seen by some people as a weakness, yet it is our strength, and it got us to where we are today, which allows us to have a strong foundation to go forward. One of the things I find out a lot in the organizations that I'm working with is that this concept of mindfulness as self-care is interesting. Expanding that definition is interesting because in the end, when we don't trust ourselves or ideas, that becomes something that will hold us back. And that's actually what every single growth plateau of every single organization that I have ever been in comes down to. Somewhere along the way, we forgot to trust ourselves and think that our ideas are good, or they come up with something else. And I think I might now be ready to go into this bold question because there's been just enough time to recalibrate what we were talking about in this new form that we co-created in the moment, wildly present. And Catherine, what makes it bold? What makes it bold to expand our definition of mindfulness for creativity in business and to be wildly present?
Mindfulness, presence, discernment, and prioritization might be the key skills for success in a professional environment. Just doing to do, are you doing the right things? You won't know that unless you stop and you say, is this the right thing? If you need to make a change in your business and you don't stop to be present and think, what could happen? What can I leverage from something else? How can we innovate? What are our clients telling us? You need to stop and be present and be mindful, whatever you want to call it, in order to ensure that you and your organization are doing the right things for your business.
Claire, what makes it bold to expand our definition of mindfulness to be wildly present?
It makes it bold because it's against the grain. It's not the usual advice we get. And we want to grow businesses. We want to expand businesses, but we also want to be happier. We want to be happier. And if you even touch on the mental health issues in business, I left a corporate job because I was so unhappy. I told my husband I would rather stab my eyes out than show up again. We talked about self-care, but I use self-care simply as a tool to return me to a better feeling state, to presence, to mindfulness. That's my cue to push back from the computer and go walk outside for 10 minutes and come back and let it go and take a deep breath and then start back from a completely different place. And it's just that's not awarded. It's really not, that's not high productivity. That's not, I came from high productivity. What are the outcomes? Nobody ever says, why don't you go take a walk? Or why don't you sit with it? Or are you happy? I managed 41 people. When I went to my director, my boss, and I said, something's not right. I said, for me to be able to do this job, losing compassion for the people that work under me, and I know that's not acceptable in my position. And she said, you don't think there's days I want to quit? Go back to work.
Janice, what makes it bold? What makes it bold to expand our definition of mindfulness to be wildly present?
Because it allows us to hear other people's ideas. And it allows us to take ideas from any quarter, whether it's our own magic 8-ball, or if it's having a conversation with the person who delivers the mail and hearing what they have to say about it in passing and running with it and giving them credit for it. It allows us to be secure in ourselves and our ideas and feed them into the soup of the conversation along with everybody else's in a way that allows everybody to have buy-in and belonging and curiosity and interest in what they're doing again.
Wow! Jess hosts the Bold Business Podcast to provide insights for building a resilient, profitable business by deeply understanding your growth strategy, ensuring market relevance and your company's future. It is bold to deeply understand your growth strategy with your host, Jess Duell. Get more information about how to drive solutions and reset your growth mindset at reddirection.com. Thank you for joining us, and special thanks to our post-production team at The Scott Treatment.